Can you hand these out to all the media? Mayors, if you want to just, everyone wants to just join us up in the front here real quickly. Everyone okay for white balance? Here's what we're going to do, everybody. We have a number of mayors from all over Minnesota.
Don't be bashful. We'll stand by the northern here.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to get a 15 minutes from everyone.
As a mayor, we're capable of doing that, not a problem.
Real quickly, everybody, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the press conference. We just have 3 speakers at our press conference. Although most of the mayors will stand after the press conference. If you have individual questions for the mayors, please feel free to go up and ask them specifically how their cities would be impacted by the potential cuts. Although, real quickly, if we could just go through and we'll just have the mayors and the city representatives introduce themselves, and we'll start over here.
Paul McLaughlin, City of Renville. Tom Coates, Mayor of Owatonna.
Crystal Franklin, Western City Manager.
Steve Cook, Mayor of Hutchinson.
Eric Sorensen, City Manager, Winona.
Marshall Hallock of the City of Red Wing.
Nancy Carroll, Mayor of City of Park Rapids.
Pat Hinches, Mankato City Manager.
Gary Zomer, North Mankato Mayor.
Tim Strand, Mayor of St. Peter.
Michael Wojak, a Mayor City Council member in Rochester.
Cynthia Jaxa, City Councilor, International Falls.
R.T. Ryback, Minneapolis.
Bruce Algren, Mayor Cloquet.
Chris Coleman, Mayor of St. Paul.
Joel Albrecht, Mayor of New Ulm.
Mike Murtaugh, Mayor Albert Lee.
Dan Ness, Mayor of Alexandria.
Great. Bruce?
Okay, thank you. As stated earlier, I'm Bruce Algren, I'm the Mayor of the City of Cloquet. I want to thank all of the other mayors for coming today, and especially St. Paul Mayor Chris Coleman and Minneapolis Mayor R.T. Ryback. And on behalf of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, I want to thank all of you for coming today. And I just want to let you know, from my perspective, maybe the coalition's, is what's at stake here today. And it's the good life in Minnesota. And that's what the good life in Minnesota, that's what I grew up with, and I'd like my kids and all your kids and people of Minnesota to grow up in the same way. The quality of life that we grew up with was strong communities that are good places to raise a family, grow a business, and live the American dream. We can't keep that Minnesota strong by decimating our cities anymore. For 40 years, Minnesota has a strong policy of supporting strong cities, adequate public safety, and affordable property taxes. No matter what corner of the state residents live in, the governor has assaulted this policy by cutting the taxes to cities by 29% this year alone. The governor has repeatedly demonstrated that for him, it has been easier to pass the buck to the cities than to confront the state budget's problems responsibly. With this plan to cut LGA by an estimated additional $88 million on the table, we're asking the legislature to stand up to the governor and to once again confirm its support for the local government aid policy. This legislature has consistently supported the LGA program in strong communities, and they must start by their commitment to protect LGA from further cuts this year. With the on-allotment decision in hand, the legislature must fight for LGA. The on-allotment decision was the right decision. It preserves our democracy going forward by balancing the power of the executive branch with the legislative branch. The legislature now needs to reassert its constitutional budget authority and support programs like LGA that have served our state well. In Cloquet, which is about 18 miles southwest of Duluth, is a population of 12,000. Since 2003, Cloquet has lost over $5.5 million in local government aid. We've reduced our workforce, we've combined positions, we're asking all of our non-essential employees to take a 40-hour-a-week furlough, and we have equipment freezes, we have our infrastructure freezes, and you know that once you freeze your infrastructure, eventually you're going to pass that buck on to future councils and other people for taxes. The library has shut down for days. We've reduced its staff. If we have any further LGA cuts in Cloquet, we're probably looking at laying off police officers. We're also looking at probably more reductions in the work staff and probably cutting into essential employees to balance that budget. We don't have any further cuts to make. We're probably as lean as we can get. At this time, I would like to introduce you to St. Paul Mayor Chris Coleman.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And as I like to say, Duluth is only 18 miles northeast of Cloquet. We have, over the last several years, stood in this room, come together as mayors and council members and city managers. We've traveled across the state of Minnesota to tell the story about the impacts of cuts to local government aid. We've stood with firefighters who were fearing depletion of their ranks. We stood with police officers who were afraid that they wouldn't have sufficient strength of force to do their job. We stood with mothers and children who were afraid that they would not have libraries and playgrounds for their kids as they were trying to provide for them. We stood with the people across the state of Minnesota that said we need to make sure that cities throughout the state have the resources that they need to survive. We have repeatedly asked the governor to come to the table. We have repeatedly asked him to bring a reasonable, balanced solution to a very serious long-term challenge to the financial problems in the state of Minnesota. We have asked him to be reasonable, and we've asked him to listen to his own words when he said that when you cut local government aid, you will by default be forcing up property taxes across the state of Minnesota. Quite frankly, I've given up any hope that any word that I can say at this podium, anything that we can say as mayors, will ever change the governor's mind. We'll ever get him to come to the table with a reasonable proposal. We'll ever get him to look at a balanced way to deal with this long-term challenge. The governor's not going to be here to deal with the consequences of what happens over the next couple weeks during this legislative session. He'll be down in Iowa, he'll be out in New Hampshire, or he'll be wherever he wants to go. But there's going to be a lot of folks that are still here next year that have to clean up the mess. And there are a lot of people that are going to be standing here wondering how the state of Minnesota went from this to the state that we're in today. Not one of us who has to deal with the budget challenges on a local level fails to get it. We know that the state is in a difficult financial situation, but so are our cities. But the difficulties of the state financial situation do not negate our need to put firefighters in the firehouses and police officers on the street. It doesn't negate our need to make sure that our streets get plowed in the winter, or that we provide the basic city services that people have come to expect. At this point, as I say, I've given up hope that anything I can say here will change the governor's mind. But I do hope that the legislature, on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, understand the critical juncture that we're at today. Understand the need to come together, understand the need to find a fiscally smart and balanced proposal that deals with the long-term challenges of the state. This isn't games. This isn't something that we can just kind of play around with anymore. We are at a very, very critical state. The decision of the Supreme Court, I think, was the correct one. But more importantly, we understand that it puts even greater pressure on the legislature right now to act. We ask them to act responsibly. We ask them to not disproportionately cut cities. We ask them to understand the vital role that the cities play in the strength of the state. And we ask them to get their work done, to roll up their sleeves, and come to a reasonable solution for the difficult challenges that we face. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Mayor Rybeck.
Thank you, Mayor Coleman. When he was president, Harry Truman had a saying on his desk that the buck stops here. Minnesota's mayors have a saying on our desk, the responsibility stops here, but the bucks are leaving town. The dollars in these communities that are generated go to the state of Minnesota, and a long-term partnership between the state and our communities has brought those dollars back to the communities to provide the most basic core services we have. The police on the street, the firefighters we have, fixing those streets, basic core services. The relationship that has really built the communities around this state, that's been based on this local government aid, is deeply broken. And what you're looking at right now are the people who actually have been balancing the state's budget. We have a lot of experience with the state's budget because we've been bailing it out year after year after year after year. The mayors of Minnesota and the local property taxpayers are proud and understand their need to step up at a critical time to solve this problem. We have done that work. We will continue to do that work. We say, however, that the hit to these local property taxpayers and to these local services has been disproportionate. And for too long, the state has lurched from one budget crisis to the next, and local communities, led by the mayors and their local property taxpayers, have had to bail the state out. This is not a one-year problem. We have seen the state, as I mentioned, lurching from one crisis to the other to the other. What that means for local governments, where the primary expense is personnel, is that we have had to budget, redo our budgets, middle of the year, end of the year, be unable to do long-term planning. And by doing that, we put hundreds of lives in jeopardy as people are trying to build their careers or try to find out their own livelihood. You cannot deliver basic core services which are based on personnel by having a roller coaster state budget that is putting local communities through incredible dislocation. So what we're calling on is for the governor and the legislature to do what they need to do. Calling every Minnesotan to step up and do their part. We have, we will, but we do not believe we should continue the disproportionate hit onto local units of government and onto property taxes. I think what I like about working with mayors is that I know that a couple of you are Republicans and a couple are Democrats, but I don't know the party of most of these mayors. What I do know is that each of them in their own way, across every piece of geography in this state, across ideology, has been solving the budget problems honestly and with a long-term approach to solutions. That's what we need out of the Capitol.
Thank you very much.
Why not ask Judge Guerin to get your money back?
I'll take that. Yeah. We absolutely could file lawsuits right now, but that would be based on the idea that somehow this is a one-year problem. This is not a one-year problem. This is a long-term problem. This is not about this year or this biennium. The challenges that we face as local units of government are solved by us having long-term plans. And this isn't about one court case. It's about the fact that we need to rebuild the relationship between the communities and the state that they're led by, or sever that relationship, and we'll keep the dollars at a local level and provide those basic core services and not send as much to the state.
Let me just add, Eric, to that. The fact of the matter is we think that I personally think that would be a Pyrrhic victory, because the reality of it is we've already adjusted to those cuts. We've dealt with it. We have adopted budgets that reflected that, and we're prepared to move forward. But what we can't move forward with is another round of cuts, followed by another round of cuts, followed by another round of cuts. Every year that we go forward where there's uncertainty, when we pass a budget in December for the following year, and then halfway through that next year we're asked to cut $5 or $10 million or proportionate shares, depending upon the size of your city, we can't go forward. So. The people of the state of Minnesota don't want this settled in a courtroom. They want it settled by the people that they elected to settle this matter, to put a solution together, and that's what we're asking them to do.
One more comment. It should also be noted that the mayors, we don't mind taking our share to help the state with its budget. We just don't want to take that unproportionate share of doing more than everyone else. And it's like going after Christmas when you go on a lot. Is buying all the Christmas presents, and then your employer tells you that you're not going to get your check, and how do you pay for that? And that's exactly what happened. We have to go into January 1 without a huge paycheck.
So you mayors are okay if the legislature ratifies the governor's previous LGA cuts that were potentially the subject of a law of the Supreme Court?
Only speaking for myself, we've dealt with that cut. We're prepared to move forward, but we want to do it in a responsible way. I don't want to speak for everybody else across the state of Minnesota. But
I would just say from my vantage point, again, we all have to speak for ourselves on that. I am comfortable with the legislature addressing this issue in the future. So we in Minneapolis are not interested in filing a lawsuit as long as the legislature and the governor address this long-term problem with a long-term solution.
Are any of the mayors here have a different view than that, a significantly different view?
I think it's just I don't know, I can't speak for all the other mayors, but speaking on behalf of myself, we don't need any additional cuts. We don't want any additional cuts because we've dealt with the on-allotment already.
Now, the mayor, you've said that you probably will have to make public safety cuts. Probably. Can anyone here say you definitely would have to make public safety cuts if the governor's proposal goes through? Just one city of all?
Couple.
How many? Definitely would have to make public safety cuts.
We've
What are
done
some
it already.
examples?
We've done it already.
Okay. What type of things? They'll want you up to the microphone. Want you up to the microphone.
Identify yourself too, if you would, sir.
Pat Hinches, Mankato City Manager. We've already reduced our budget to 2006 levels. We reduced our workforce across the board, public safety cuts included, by 15%. I can tell you what this means, the latest governor's threats in terms of a cuts he announced this past week. We would have to reduce our full-time, it's equivalent to our full-time labor in our fire department. All of the full-time labor, $1.4 million. It's reduced. It would be equivalent to all of our full-time labor in our park department. It would be equivalent to half our library levy. And at this point in time, I think our council feels very strongly that we've already made cuts in the police department, school liaison programs, school resource officers, crossing guard protection, those types of things. We cannot make the cuts that sustain more cuts in our public works department, particularly with the cuts we've made in a very tough winter, street maintenance, those types of things. So those are areas that we've already reduced. We have no more choices but to raise taxes by 25% or reduce some of these areas and look for other service alternatives or just plain less service in those areas.
Last year, when the governor was making these cuts, and mayors across the metro were saying, well, we're cutting police and fire, the governor's answer to that was, well, you don't know what you're doing. If you're cutting police and fire with what I'm doing to you, you guys don't know what you're doing. Your thoughts?
The governor's never had to deal with this, and I've had this conversation with the governor. The governor, when he first started going down this road, said his number one priority was going to be veterans and public safety, or number 1 and 2, veterans and public safety. When I reminded the governor that it was, in fact, the cities across the state of Minnesota that provided public safety through police officers and firefighters, he quickly changed the language that he used to say, well, my priority is going to be veterans and the public safety services that the state provides. That's not police officers, that's not firefighters, and that's not honest with the people of Minnesota that says he's prioritizing public safety. I'm going to answer a little bit by telling you the situation in the city of St. Paul. We've received, because we have a partnership with the federal government that gets it and the Obama administration, a lot of money to put additional police officers in the city of St. Paul. In fact, we put 30 new officers in the city. As a result of obtaining that federal grant, our cuts cannot come from personnel. Our cuts will come from other areas. And let me tell you where that affects you. If you can't cut personnel, but you got to start cutting training, then you're endangering the lives of our officers and you're endangering the lives of our citizens. And if you don't think that training matters, just go back to Saturday afternoon in the city of St. Paul after that horrible, tragic situation. And I don't want to make political hay out of it, but I will just tell you this. It was the training and the knowledge and the skill set of those officers that allowed them to solve that situation as quickly as they did. That's what you lose when you start cutting budgets. Even if you don't lay off police officers, if you lose their training, if you lose their ability to respond to the situation in a professional manner, then you have diminished public safety in the state of Minnesota. So the governor can sit there and he can point his fingers, but I want the governor to tell me how he's going to solve this in a way that doesn't destroy the fabric of this community, that doesn't destroy the quality of life in the state.
I guess I'm at a little bit of a loss, because up until the unallotments, the state budget has gone up every year since statehood. And you said that over the last 10 years, property taxes have gone up 60%. You say your ability to provide services is diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. Do you guys have any idea what's going on?
Every cost has gone up. Healthcare costs have risen dramatically. Fuel costs have risen dramatically. You know, people say, well, why do you got to pay more to have police officers on the street? Well, you know, the gasoline hasn't gone down in price. It's called inflation. Now, I know the governor may have missed that class in college, but the fact of the matter is inflation is a reality for every one of us on a city level, and every one of us that has to deal with the fact that healthcare costs have been shooting through the roof, and that the cost of putting personnel on the street, it's not, you know, we're not just sitting here saying we just want more, we want more. Every one of us has had to trim, every one of us has had to make tough decisions, every one of us has had to take a balanced approach on property taxes and on the deployment of our resources. But the fact of the matter is costs go up. That is just a fact of life. You used to be able to buy, you know, they used to call it penny candy. I dare you to go find a piece of candy anywhere in the state of Minnesota for a penny. Inflation happens. The governor needs to recognize that.